Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, which will be on how to write a great CV. So you'll have myself guiding you through it. I'm Tammy, and also my colleague Rosa. We're two of the career coaches at Evenbreak, and we'll also have Toby behind the scenes doing all the important tech stuff. We've also got Jacob, our BSL interpreter, and Tara, our captioner. Now, if you could let me know if you can see the captions, that would be great. They are active. This is one of a series of career planning webinars. We'll spend about 30 to 40 minutes today, with around 10 minutes for a questions and answer session at the end. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the Hive for future viewing. We did have a job search strategies webinar a week or so ago. That is now recorded and available on the Hive. If it's not there, it's nearly there. It'll be there soon. And you're welcome to check in on that resource at any time. Please submit questions that you have to the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end of the session. And the chat box also will be available throughout. And you're very welcome to share your experiences with each other or let us know, how we're doing at any point. So Toby, next slide, please. So what can you expect to learn today? So what we'll be doing is talking about how you can best reflect on your experiences and your work history. Because knowing how to present your skills and your achievements in a way that makes it easier for an employer to see your best bits is really important when it comes to CVs. Part of that is being able to talk about what you've learned through your life experiences and expressing them in a succinct but immediately impactful way. We'll also talk about different types of CV formats and why they matter. So there are different types of CV format depending on where you are in your career journey. So if you have taken a long time out of work, then maybe a skills-based CV might be better. If you've got less experience, say you've just finished university, again, skills-based might be better. But if you've got a long working history, then chronological could be best for you. But we'll talk about that more later. We'll also teach you a bit about understanding the value of tailoring your CV to every job vacancy. And that part is really important because that's the part that makes you stand out against everyone else. And employers will expect you to have read through all of the paperwork and all of the advertisements that they've sent for you to know the job very well. And that's how you can express how well you know that job. Toby, next slide, please. So handing over to Rosa for our opening poll.
Thank you, Tammy. So really interesting question. What barriers are you up against when it comes to your CV? So this is our opening poll, and we would like, Toby, if you could open the poll, if you could answer this, just go with your gut. So what barriers are you up against when it comes to your CV? I don't have a CV and don't know where to start. I know there are different formats of CV, but I don't know which one to choose. I don't know how to identify my experience and skills or write about them. I don't know how to write an effective professional profile. There's a gap in my work history and I don't know how to address it. Or perhaps it could be, I have a CV and submitted to jobs, but I'm not getting interviews. How many of you have come across that one? Or I don't believe anyone will employ me, even if I have the best CV in the world. So, which one pertains to you? Which one is more relevant to you?
You can also, just to interrupt, sorry, Rosa, you can also pick more than one of those answers. So if more than one applies to you, you can choose that. And if you can see two polls, please just answer the first one. The second one will come to later in the session. Sorry, Rosa.
That's okay, Tammy. So which one of these was relevant for you? Tammy?
Me, myself. Oh, I don't know. During my life, I think all of them.
Yes, I think it's the same for me.
Yeah. I mean, certainly most recently, I would say there's a gap in my work history and I don't know how to address it. Because for some time I was too ill to work and there was actually a health gap on my CV, which I felt like I needed to fill. And actually it's more about reflecting that you had a gap rather than trying to hide it. And if you drew anything out of the experience of having the gap, so if you were, for instance, not unwell, you were doing something else, perhaps you were studying, perhaps you were traveling, perhaps you were, doing something else with your life at that point. It's about how you reflect that in the gap too. So having a gap is not the end of the world. But that was quite a difficult one for me to overcome.
Yeah, okay. So, Toby, do we have any results from the poll yet? Okay. So, Tommy, I'm going to let you drive this one.
Okay, no worries. So we have, thankfully, nobody here doesn't already have a CV. That's really good. We're already off to a flying start. 50% of you have said, I know there are different formats of CV, but I don't know which one to choose. Don't worry, we will be covering that. We also have articles on the Hive that will cover the formats in more detail and how you choose which one is right for you. Nobody has said that they don't know how to identify their experience and skills, which is really good. 17% of you have said, I don't know how to write an effective professional profile. That one is really tricky. You have to think quite hard about what you want to say about yourself, because that's the bit, that's you. That's not just what you've done. That's you as a person. But actually, we've got a formula that will help you create your own professional profile later on in the session. Nobody here had any concerns about a gap in their work history, or they didn't say so in that particular answer. That's good. I have a CV and submitted to jobs, but I'm not getting interviews. 17% of you said that was true for you. We will talk about that further. It could be that you'll get the answers sometime in the webinar, and if not, then it might be worth coming along to see one of the coaches in a one-to-one session, either in the open sessions that we run. We have a drop-in on Tuesday morning between 10 and 12, and Friday afternoon between 2 and 3. So you're welcome to come and have a chat with us so we can see how you've done.
Can I interrupt? Can I just ask what workshop was that, sorry?
Oh, sorry. It's a careers coach drop-in.
Okay. And can you talk about what the workshop offers, please?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, the careers drop-in. Can I ask what event the time is and the date?
Oh, sorry. Did I rushed through? No worries. So the times are Tuesday between 10 and 12 and Friday between 2 and 3. Thank you for clarifying. Then we also had one person who said, I don't believe anyone will employ me, even if I have the best CV in the world. I have been there too. And it's, a lot of the time, it's about how you view your own experiences and how you express them. That's the first part of the challenge. And having confidence that you do have skills, you do have unique abilities. And that's what we need to express to an employer. And nobody has said more than one of these answers. So that's good. A lot of you went on and answered poll 2, but we'll come back to that one. Thank you, Toby. Please close the poll. So, Toby, next slide, please. Brilliant, thank you. So, identifying your skills and experience. You need to explore your work history, and it can be hard to think back about to the things that you've done in the past. It's so easy to get lost in the actual doing of something that you don't think about how you did something. But it's really useful to become very familiar with your work history. So that helps you when it comes to applying, it helps you in interviews, it helps you to remember how much you've actually achieved so far. You will develop hundreds of skills during your lifetime, and it's just about selecting which ones you want to use, and actually also which ones you don't want to use. You can also ask for feedback. So trusted others can have helpful views on your skills and achievements. So anyone who's worked with you, friends, family, anyone you've ever done anything for or with, volunteering, those people can provide a different view on what they think your skills and achievements are. And they can almost tell a story about the thing that you did, focusing on the actions that you took and the results that happened afterwards. But also don't be modest, don't hold back when you're working on your CV. You can't convince an employer unless you can convince yourself. So you have to believe in yourself. And I know that's more of a challenge than making it sound. And if you struggle with that, again, making an appointment with a coach will be able to help you. The coaching service is free. We'll talk more about the Hive at the end. But yeah, don't hold back, because if you don't get shortlisted for an interview, you don't get to talk about how good you are at interview. And also, how do you transfer your skills? So the skills that you have don't necessarily have to go into the same sector. So for instance, if you're an administrator in education and you don't want to continue working in education, it's quite simple to pick up those skills and transfer them to a new area. So if you're struggling with the sector, you don't have to stay in it. You can kind of sidestep into something else. And also in identifying skills and experience, think about how you solve problems. One framework for thinking about that is PAR, which stands for Problem, Action and Result. It's very similar if you've heard of STAR, which is Situation, Task, Action, Result, or CAR, which is Context, Action and Result. They're all basically the same framework, but they get you to think about what you did and what happened afterwards. And employers are really interested in the action and the result part because they like to know how you think and what you deliver. Toby, next slide, please.
Okay, great, Tammy, thank you. I noticed that in the poll, quite a lot of people were interested in understanding, you know, how would they design or format their CV. So here you are. Building your CV and choosing the right design can really help make that first impression. So there are 3 key things that you want to look at when you're exploring a CV design or format. You want to choose a design that suits your current situation, that showcases your skills, and that also showcases you in the most favorable light. So here's just an example of 3 different types of CV format. So the first one is a chronological CV. A chronological CV shows the jobs in the order that they've happened, really starting with the most recent job first and then working its way back. Chronological CVs are very traditional in layout. They're probably the most common form of CV that you will see. And they are the most preferred by hiring managers and also by recruiters, simply because they're quite linear and it's very easy for hiring managers and recruiters to navigate their way around a chronological CV. So who does a chronological CV suit? Chronological CVs will suit those who have lots of work experience, essentially in a similar type of job or industry, or those who are eager to demonstrate career progression. So typically that's who a chronological CV would suit. But of course you can customize it. So for example, if you're a student, you can do what's called a reverse chronological CV. So rather than starting with your work experience first, you would actually start with your education and your qualifications. Okay. So the second type of CV is what we call a skills-based CV or a functional CV. So rather than the emphasis being placed on your work history and experience, the emphasis really focuses on your skills, your talents, and your strengths that you have gained throughout your work history. So this is a really rather flexible type of CV format. Your skills can be mixed and matched. So what I mean by that is that you can use skills from work experience, from life experience, and also from volunteering as well. You would still list your employer, obviously, on this type of CV, but as I've mentioned, the emphasis really is on your skills and your strengths. So who does this suit? This suits, I suppose, those who have a skill gap or those who have been out of work for a period of time, and those who also want to demonstrate or share their transferable skills. So, but it can suit everyone. I mean, there's really no hard and fast rule here when we're talking about CV design or format. The last one is a combination CV, otherwise known as a hybrid, and it really mixes elements of both a chronological and a skills-based CV. So you get the best of both worlds, really, don't you, Tammy?
You do.
Yeah,
and it's really, it is partly, you know, your personal preference as well, as Rosa said. Sometimes it's just easier to get your experience to fit one or the other.
Yeah, so like a chronological CV, you would obviously demonstrate in the work section your work history, starting with your most recent first. But you can also have an achievements or a skills section that sits above your work section. So essentially, this really suits those who have a mix of work experience and a lot of skills, and who wants to share their achievements as well. The only difference with this type of CV format is the only downside is that it can have a tendency to be a little bit longer than a skills-based CV or a chronological CV, simply because you're mixing the best of both worlds in this type of CV. So I hope that's helped, giving you a little bit of an overview on the different types of layouts and how you might want to best use them. Next slide, Toby.
Okay, so how do you demonstrate your achievements? As I mentioned before, employers are interested in seeing how you work as well as what you deliver. They're interested in your decision-making processes, how you work through a problem. So remember PAR, problem, action, and result. You can, again, work with other people or with yourself to review your work history. Take a time when you did something, when you had to solve a problem. And disabled people solve problems all the time because we face barriers that other people don't have to. Then think about the action that you took to overcome the problem and what the result was. And also, when you're demonstrating your achievements, think about using action words, or sometimes we refer to these as skills as verbs. There's over 200 of them. We do have an article on the Hive that lists the over 200, so we'll give you something to get your teeth into. But action words can help focus your story. They make it more compelling to read, and they save you space. So you can make an impact much more quickly with a small amount of words. So a helpful formula to think about them in is I, action word, achievement, which led to quantifiable outcome. But so from my example, from my work history, is I composed, that's my action word, our communication strategy, my achievement for Twitter, which led to a 167% increase in followers. That's my quantifiable outcome. Now, sometimes you might have qualitative outcomes, which you can't easily stick a percentage on. And that's when you come back to PAR. So when you talk about the actions and the results that you took, because it's less obvious looking at it from the outside what the actual result was, whereas quantitative stuff is very, very easy to see straight away. Toby, next slide, please.
Great, okay.
So Rosa, do you want to go with this slide and I'll do the next two, which are the review points?
Okay, so this one is writing a standout personal statement. Is that what we have?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so.
Oh, I think oh, sorry, Toby, back one slide, please. That's
thank you.
Why we were a bit confused, I think. There we go.
Great, thank you, Toby. Thank you, Tammy.
No worries.
Okay, so writing a standout professional statement. Did you know, Tammy, that recruiters and hiring managers take up to anywhere between 7 and 10 seconds to scan through a CV?
And that's quite generous. Sometimes it's between 5 and 7. It depends on the recruiter.
Okay, so what is that first piece of information that they're going to look at when they see your CV? It's going to be that little piece of information that sits below your name and your contact details, but just directly above the work section of your CV. So it's called a personal statement. Just a couple of tips on a personal statement and how to write it. The most important thing is to understand this is your chance to make a really good first impression. Okay, your personal statement really is framing the rest of your CV. So a couple of tips. First of all, we don't want an essay. Anywhere up to 6 sentences is absolutely fine for a personal statement. So you want to see this as an elevator pitch. It's an opportunity for you to market yourself, but also to demonstrate not just who you are, but how you're a good fit for the organization and potentially what your career aspirations are. So we don't want to waste space. This is a really, really important piece of information. So try not to use CV cliches at all. It does need to be very tailored to your job description. It needs to be clear, simple, and concise and straight to the point. So if you can quantify your achievements and you can make an impact more quickly by crafting a really strong personal statement. And here's a formula for you. Again, there's an article written on this and it's on the Hive. So I recommend that you refer to the Hive. But essentially, this is the formula. So the first sentence is you start off with some active nouns that sort of describe who you are. You can also use a professional title followed by the number of years of experience. And then what you want to do is you want to leave the recruiter or the hiring manager with one key achievement that's tailored to that job description. So this is a really simple format that you can use. And again, as I've mentioned, you want to keep it really simple and concise and straight to the point, no more than at least 6 sentences. So Tommy, I think you're going to show us an example.
Yes, Toby, next slide, please. So what we're actually going to start with is a weak example, because we talked about avoiding those cliches. And let's see how many you can actually count in this example. So the example that's weak is the same as the example that's strong. I'll talk to you about a strong example shortly. And they are both me. So a weak professional statement would be, I'm a hardworking, reliable and enthusiastic person with a broad range of experience in admin, recruitment and coaching. Detail-oriented with strong interpersonal and IT skills. A good team player who is dedicated and able to use their own initiative to achieve personal and company goals. Flexible and learns new skills quickly. Now, all of that is true, but it's also expected by an employer. So telling an employer that you're hardworking, reliable, enthusiastic is kind of a waste of that space. So there are at least 8 or 9 probably cliches in that professional statement. If your professional statement looks like this, it's not going to get you interviews because it doesn't tell them enough about you. It doesn't tell a recruiter enough. You don't stand out. On the other hand, Toby, next slide, please. A strong professional statement might be inspirational career coach and trainer with over 10 years experience in medical education and recruitment. Improving the lives of over 50 clients in 4 months, I use innovation to help them move forward on their career pathway. Working mostly with disabled clients and with a strong belief in person-centered coaching, I bring empathy, pragmatism and drive to the one-to-one coaching space. That statement is based on the formula. We will share these slides with you, and as Rosa said, there is an article about this formula on the Hive, but it makes it so much easier to actually construct and share what is so good about you, and you will all have something that is so good about you that it needs to go right at the top of your CV.
Can I just make a suggestion? I mean, why not craft a couple of samples? You know, test it out, play around with it, test a couple of examples, you know, lean on some friends, share it with some friends, see what they think, and then come up with your final solution. But this actually might change depending on the job that you apply for, because essentially, ideally, you do want to change your CV and tailor it to each job that you're applying for. You know, obviously, that might even just mean the smallest of tweaks. Isn't that right, Tammy?
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so that's my 2-bit in, Tammy.
No, that's brilliant. No, and it's right. And in fact, you might need to draft, you know, depending on how many types of CV that you have, and we'll come to that later as well, then you might need to write one for every type of CV that you have, depending on which sectors and which sort of jobs that you're applying for. Toby, next slide, please.
Okay, addressing gaps. Taking the elephant out of the room. It's interesting actually, because I did have a conversation with someone today about this exact topic. How do I address gaps in my CV? So I think the first thing to understand is that, you know, life isn't linear. It has its ups and downs, right? So, you know, gaps in our CV really are understandable. So gaps in our work history can happen for all sorts of reasons. That can include anything from redundancy, health reasons, perhaps a job didn't fit and you decided to move on after 3 months. And these are all, you know, legitimate reasons, and it's perfectly fine. So I think the most important thing here is to understand that you don't have to hide behind the gaps. You don't have to not show the gaps on your CV, but you will have to be able to explain those gaps to a recruiter or a hiring manager, because, you know, at the end of the day, gaps will be red flags for employers and recruiters, but it really depends on how you handle it and how you come across with explaining those gaps. So please don't be afraid to address them. I think, Tammy, remember you mentioned earlier that this was a biggie for you. How did you address that gap, and how did you approach it in the end?
I eventually just got to the stage where I thought I have to address this, and in my case, I just put career break due to ill health. And I didn't have to go into any detail. I just put that, and I put the period that it covered. And although I was unemployed for 3 years, there was stuff I was doing in that 3 years that I was well enough to do that I did for myself. So I'm also writing. I was writing a novel. So I put that in as another entry. So the gaps didn't look so terrifying. So even though there were gaps, some of them were labelled as ill health gaps and some were labelled as novel writing gaps. And that was accurate. That was the truth. And it was just thinking about how the best way was to continue with the chronological CV, but to include those gaps and what happened in them.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That was amazing. Okay, so, if you've learned anything in the gap, as Tommy's mentioned there, use it. Your experiences make you who you are, and you can draw from every area of your life. I mean, here's just one other tip. If you have a gap in your CV, like right now, start doing something about it. Think about doing volunteering, take a course, do some freelancing. So if you are out there and you have got that gap and you're sort of transitioning, you're looking for new employment or new opportunities, really think about how you can be building your skills right now. Volunteering is really, really underrated, isn't it, Tommy? And it's so critical because I've come across so many candidates that have just amazing skills that they have built through their volunteering experience.
It is. Volunteering is a great thing to do from a personal standpoint, if you can do it, and from a professional standpoint, because you learn different skills and you meet different people. And I guess my only caution would be is if you are volunteering and somehow can't get into paid work, because obviously volunteering requires you to still have some money to live with, then again, come and see a coach, because we might be able to give you some more tips and a bit more direction on what's happening.
Absolutely. Okay, Toby, next slide.
Brilliant. So to include or not to include, there can be big debates on some of the things that are either traditionally accepted as normal in a CV or things that you kind of come across and don't know how to deal with as you get more experience, as CV design even progresses. So things not to include or to include. So hobbies and interests. Some of these things, by the way, have an absolute answer and some don't. Some of them are contextual. So hobbies and interests traditionally is included on a CV, but there is a debate that says it is an opportunity for employers and recruiters to actually judge against you on the basis of your hobbies and interests. So I would say include hobbies and interests if they're relevant or if you can make them relevant. So for instance, one of my hobbies is writing a novel. And if I was, say, going to be in a job where I write for a website, I would definitely want to include that because it's relevant to the job. If it's not relevant to the job, consider whether you can afford the space to include it or whether it adds anything to your overall CV. Work history more than 10 years old. You don't really have to include that. It really depends how much time over the 10 years you've actually been working. So, and again, that comes down to choosing the right format of CV for you. But I would say that your work history of more than 10 years old on the CV, you just don't have space for everything. And everything that you've done in the last 10 years is probably more relevant and shows your progression in a way that including, everything ever doesn't. The exception to that is if you've got LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, they would say include everything. But with LinkedIn, you don't have the space issue quite as much. So with a CV, it should be 2 pages and no more. In fact, if your CV is more than 2 pages, you do need to cull bits out of it. Secondary school qualifications. If you have a university degree, you don't need to include your secondary school qualifications because the assumption is you've already progressed to a point where your secondary school qualifications don't count for anything. But if you don't have, say, a university degree or a higher qualification, then you need to include your secondary school qualifications to show that you have a good general educational level. Disability or impairments. There is absolutely no requirement for you to state your disability or any impairments or anything like that on your CV. If you choose to, you can. If you would like to use skills that you have because of your impairments, then you definitely can. But there's nothing to say that you have to. So that's a decision for you to make. Your age doesn't belong on a CV. It's not necessary. It is illegal to judge harshly against you on the basis of age, to discriminate against you on the basis of age. They're not allowed to do it, but don't give them the opportunity. Don't tell them how old you are. There is no requirement for you to state your marriage status or dependency. If you have children, if you are a carer, there is absolutely no requirement for you to add that to your CV. Again, you're protected from discrimination on those grounds, and don't give them the opportunity to judge harshly against you. Photos. This has context, so mostly we would say a photo is not necessary on a CV. If you're applying for a job in modelling, then it might be. So this is a little bit industry specific, but probably have a look and see what the submission guidelines are for the job ads that you're looking at. But almost certainly, for at least 90% of candidates, a photo isn't necessary. Again, with LinkedIn, it's considered good because it shows you're a real person, but we would actually conversely recommend it on a CV. Usually you don't include a photo. Date of birth comes along with age. You don't need to include it, leave it off. Home address, most of the time recruiters or employers will contact you via email or phone now. So your home address isn't necessary, and it does, again, give them a chance to judge harshly against you because of where you live. And references. If you want to include a note about references, you can just say references available on request, but don't actually add your references contact details because it gives the recruiter a chance to contact them before you're ready to. And it's always a good idea to contact your references, your referees, when you're applying for work so that they know to expect something. Otherwise, you lose the opportunity to get in there first and also tell them about the job you're applying for and how they might best answer the query of the person asking for the references. Next slide, please.
Okay, making your CV ATS compliant. So what is ATS? ATS stands for an applicant tracking system. And pretty much recruiters and employers use applicant tracking systems to manage applications, including your CV. So just imagine an applicant tracking system is like a big search engine or a big bot, and it scans and sifts and ranks your CV based on the job description on which you've applied to. So the key here is to make sure that your CV is ATS compliant by tailoring it as best as possible to that job description and that person specification. So here's a couple of quick tips to help you bypass that bot and to get your CV shortlisted. Incorporate keywords. So what do I mean by keywords? So keywords are those significant words that you'll find in the job description: key skills, key knowledge, key experience. Make sure that you're using those keywords and incorporating that across your CV, including, by the way, your personal statement. But it has to reflect the skills, the experience, and the knowledge that you actually do have. Another key thing to remember is that ATSs will not only determine the strength of your CV based on how well your CV matches to those keywords, but how often you use those keywords. Okay, so you might also want to standardize your job titles. And what I mean by that is, if the job description uses the word recruiting or customer services manager, you really want to reflect that exact language so that the ATS picks that up across your CV. Keep your CV designed simple and text-based. So ATS systems find it very difficult to understand tables, fancy fonts, logos. So you want to strip all of that out and keep your CV really concise, simple, and straight to the point, because otherwise you'll confuse the ATS. You want to avoid complex CV templates. So essentially, you can use the chronological, the skills-based, or the hybrid CV, because what actually happens is the ATS will pull all of the information together and create a chronological CV, but you'll not be penalized if you use any one of those templates. So you want to also follow the submission instructions regarding file types. So just as you're about to click that Apply Now button, you will see that there's an option to usually upload Word or PDF. That's when you pretty much know that you're up against the ATS. Typically, most ATSs, what we recommend is that you use the Word doc, because that will cover all ATSs. Not a lot, but some ATSs, don't use PDF. So just to be on the safe side, we recommend that you just use your basic Word docs to upload your CV. Consider Job Scan to check your CV for compliance. This is an absolutely fabulous website. It's got some really sophisticated tools. You can actually cut paste the job description into the system and also upload your CV, and it acts like a bot. It starts matching your CV against the job description. Just one note of caution is that JobScan is an American system. So, this information is obviously outside of the UK, but it's a fantastic opportunity for you to actually do that last quick check and just compare and make sure that your CV is really matching against that job description. So those are just a couple of tips on how to bypass the ATS and get your CV shortlisted. Next slide, Toby.
So common pitfalls, what do people do a lot that is wrong? So your CV being longer than 2 pages. If your CV is longer than 2 pages and you're not deliberately keeping a long CV to cut down, and we will talk a bit about tailoring next, in the end, what you submit has to be 2 pages. If you are a medical doctor or an academic, then there are some instances when your CV can be longer than 2 pages, but for the vast majority of people, that's all you have to make an impression with. Poor grammar and spelling. Even if you know grammar and spelling are not your strong points, run it through the spell checker, run it through a grammar checker, ask somebody else to look at it. Sometimes we don't see our own mistakes. Even the people who are best with grammar and spelling will sometimes miss mistakes. It's always good advice to have somebody else look it over and give it a final tick box so that you know it's good for grammar and spelling. Inconsistent formatting. So for instance, if you have one date format type on your chronological CV, and then that becomes a different type. So for instance, you have 10 Jan 2020, and that becomes 10/1/20. That doesn't work very well. So you have to make sure that you have one date format and stick with it. As we said before, using tired phrases like hard worker, willing to learn new skills, great team player in your professional profile is cliche and a waste of your time. Underselling yourself. Don't undersell yourself. You have so much to offer. It might be difficult to get other people to see that sometimes, but you do. You have loads to offer. Overselling yourself is almost as bad. So if a recruiter thinks that you're overselling yourself, or worse, that you're lying, which is the next point on this list, they will either not shortlist you because they think you're lying, or in worst case scenario, if you are lying and you do get the job, you can be dismissed. So lying on in a recruitment process is usually gross misconduct. And if you're discovered doing it, you can be sacked. As we said before, not addressing gaps in your work history. You now know how to do that. So you can include those gaps as positives, or at least reflect them. Not front loading the most interesting and relevant things about you. Always put the things that are most important that you really want a recruiter to see in the first half of the first page, because that's, again, thinking about how much time you have to impress a recruiter, somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds. That's what they're really going to be looking at. So that professional profile, the top skills that you have, or your most recent role and the top things that you did, top load all of that, put it right at the top of everything. And then the other pitfall is not tailoring your CV for every job you apply for. That's really key. And Rose is going to talk about that next. Toby, next slide, please.
Yeah, so tailoring your CV to each role. I mean, this is such a key part, isn't it, Tammy? If you're not tailoring your CV to the role, or you're going to get shortlisted. So the key here really is to spend time reviewing your position description and also the person specification. Really understand it and analyze it, because that will give you the key pieces of information that you need to place into your CV. So make sure you cover that essential criteria, as well as the desirables. Some job descriptions will have desirable as well as essential. You want to try and cover off both bases in order to be at your best and to get shortlisted for the interview. Here's a simple tip: get a highlighter pen or just a pen and print out your position description and highlight those keywords. Spend time and focus on knowledge, experience, and the skills required, and just map that across to your CV and make sure that you're covering all of those key points. If you have similar experience to what's been asked for, that's absolutely fine. Understand how to use your transferable skills. Time and time again, actually, I find a lot of candidates are unsure how to use their transferable skills on their CV. How do I map that across? How do I make that work? If you're unsure, please reach out to Tammy and I, and we're more than happy to help support you, or Caroline and Amy, and we're happy to do some CV reviews if you're unsure. Another key thing is you want to try and emulate or mirror the language that's used in the position description or the job specification, and indeed often across the company website as well. Keep a long CV with all your examples. This is an absolutely fantastic tip, isn't it, Tammy? Because you will be able to select the relevant example based on the job that you're going for. It's always better to have more than one example. I always recommend have 2 to 3 examples of each skill set that you need. And then you're able to pull that out and use it when and if you need it across the CV. Again, Tammy, Caroline, Amy, and myself are more than happy to show you how to do this by using the POWER or the STAR as a formula to help you craft those wonderful success stories or achievements. So those are just a couple of tips on how to tailor your CV to each role. Next slide.
So cover letters. Inevitably, you'll be asked to provide something by way of a cover letter. We won't spend too much time on it today. But basically, if your CV is the who, what, where, and when of your career, then the cover letter is why. And that's the bit where you get to tell the employer why you. Sometimes this is called a cover letter. Sometimes it might be give us 250 words on why this is the right job for you or why you want this job. And that's still a cover letter material. So they do increasingly take different names or forms, but they are still the same kind of thing. You can basically break a cover letter down into 4 paragraphs. Paragraph 1 is your introduction. Hello, my name is, that kind of stuff. Paragraph 2 is why you. And then paragraph 3 is what you bring to the table. So paragraph 2 is why you. I'm interested in this job because. That's the bit where you can show off how much you know about the organisation and how well it meets your experience. And then further to that, in your paragraph 3, you can talk about the experience that you have. What's going to make the employer's life easier? That's the bit you focus on there. And then paragraph 4 is, thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing from you. Please let me know what you think of my CV, that closing statement. And remember that you're writing this to match the person's specification. So remember PAR, which was problem, action, and result. So thinking about how you solve problems, that action part that the employer is so interested in. Toby, next slide, please.
Okay, so I think that finishes us with the CV. We're really looking forward to any questions you might have. But just before we move to that, I just quickly wanted to share with you Evenbreak Career Hive and upcoming events. Obviously, as well as the one-to-one coaching that Tammy, myself, Caroline and Amy provide, you can at any time, 24/7, gain access to all of the career planning resources on our fabulous Hive. It's a library of videos, articles, content on everything related to job search, CV, mock interviews, applications. But there's also some resources on other areas that we have as well, such as Money Matters. reasonable adjustments, access to work. So please, I encourage you to spend a little bit of time on the Hive using those resources to supplement potentially any one-to-one guidance coaching sessions that you get from Amy, myself, Caroline, or Amy. There's also targeted support services in your local area. So this is all built down geographically. Again, feel free to use that. It's on the Hive. We've got Meet the Employer events, fabulous webinars that allows you to meet with employers to find out about their recruitment, the job roles that they have, and the opportunities. And it's also your opportunity to ask any questions. We've had some really, really successful results with candidates who've come along to those Meet the Employer events. Ask help from a coach. That goes without saying. It's no cost. There's no cost associated. It's private and it's also confidential. And you can have as many sessions as you would like. It is obviously driven by you, so you let us know what your needs are, and we help support you on that job search journey. So here's 2 webinars that are coming up. Why your disability makes you a premium candidate, and that's going to be on July the 1st at 11 a.m. And then we have access to work and how it can work for you. So if you're wanting to find out a little bit more about how you can be supported and thrive in your world of work, or as a self-employed person, you might want to check out that webinar. And that's on July 13th at 2 o'clock. So that's it. Over to you, Tammy.
Thank you, Rosa. Toby, next slide, please. So we were going to have a closing poll, but I think the way we do polls needs some work. What we are going to actually do is ask you to fill in a feedback form at the end of the session. So Toby, if you could go to the next slide, we'll skip the poll, but we are really interested in how interesting you found the session. We are about to go to questions and answers, and we do have lots of those. But before you navigate away right at the end, please do fill out that form. We do listen to what you're saying. We always want to give you the most relevant advice possible. So on the questions and answers slide, we're just about to come to your questions. Rosa and I will have a crack at those together. But just to let you know, those are the resources that we used at the building of this presentation. Every item listed there is available in the Evenbreak Career Hive. So asking for feedback, the PAR technique, the art of CV design, crafting an executive CV for those of you who have that kind of level of experience, the power of action words, how to craft a standout personal statement for your CV, creating an ATS friendly CV, the cover letter master file. So we do have an example of cover letters that you can draw up and how you can have one long document with, again, multiple paragraphs that meet the requirements of different roles. And we do have some CV templates in there as well. You might also find the CV book, How to Avoid the Most Common Mistakes and Write a Winning CV by James Innes, useful. It is in a lot of libraries, so if you can't afford to buy it, then it might be available there for you. So questions. We do have a question on career gaps. So the question is, Rosa, if you want to have a go first, would you advise us to explain career gaps in a CV or an interview? Which is best? If gaps are unexplained, is this very likely to put them off?
Thanks, Tommy. That's a great question. I would say focus on your strengths on your CV. Why would you want to talk about your gaps? I mean, you know, recruiters or employers are really savvy. If they feel they want to ask you that, they will ask you that at any point. More times than not, they'll probably usually ask you that at interview stage. You know, your CV is like prime real estate. You want to get all the really cool, juicy, fabulous pieces of content on your CV rather than wanting to focus on your gaps. So you don't have to. I mean, it'll come up at interview, or if you're meeting with a recruiter, they may ask you that as a matter of course anyway. So I wouldn't get too fixated on, you know, explaining away gaps on your CV. It's not necessary.
And further to what I was saying previously about gaps in CVs and how I'd struggled with it, in fact, for both of the jobs I got afterwards, nobody asked me about the gap at any point. So although I put it on the CV, nobody mentioned it. So it can be a thing of concern without it actually being a problem, if that makes sense. So next question is, I have been out of work for over a year now, and as much as I'd like to be and interested in working as a volunteer, as anything is better than nothing, I can no longer afford to work for no money as savings are now gone. But I cannot get a paid job either. So as I said, I guess something is better than nothing, but will universal credit remain in place as a volunteer? So my understanding, and this is only my understanding, and I recommend that you usually have a contact at Universal Credit. My understanding is that if it's unpaid, you can do pretty much as much of it as you want to. But if you have concerns or questions about that, you're better to address that to the DWP than us, really. But that's my understanding, is that volunteering is great. It's only if there's actually money changing hands that they're particularly interested.
Yeah, that's correct, Tommy. If you're volunteering and you're not getting paid for it, so it has no effect at all. You can work up to a certain limit, i.e. A certain wage or time, but you want to check obviously on the website to understand a little bit more about that, or again speak directly to someone at your job centre plus and find out exactly what that upper limit is. What can you earn before it starts to affect your universal credit? That's a great question. Thanks for asking.
And then another question, what would you class as secondary school qualifications that you said university graduates can remove from their CV? So that's things like GCSEs. If you've got a university degree, you can probably take your A-levels off as well. If you say qualified in Scotland, then there's a different sort of secondary level education result that you might have. So, but the rule is kind of the same. So if you have a higher level of qualification, you have A-levels or you have a university degree or a vocational degree, usually those secondary level qualifications can be removed. Rosa, have you got anything to add to that?
No, Tommy, that's perfect.
Good stuff. And so then we also have the biggest problem deaf people face today is telephone. How does it work for the deaf candidates when applying for a job? I'm sorry to be blunt here, but all employers should be aware about deaf people who cannot hear on the telephone and would prefer to use email. Deaf people do not need to put telephone number on their CV, especially online application forms. I get a lot of HR to ask my telephone number, and that personally don't want to reveal that I'm deaf. How would you correct this problem? So there's kind of two problems here. The problem in society, which is much more difficult to correct, which is where everyone assumes everyone can use the phone, which is not the case for a deaf person. And the problem of not wanting to reveal your disability earlier than you absolutely have to. So the downside is, I'm going to say it's your choice. I've seen people refer to it as saying text only next to the phone number. It's arguable that that would reveal the fact that you're deaf. You can, as you say, you can remove the phone number, but that then people email you to ask you for a phone number, which is a bit odd when they could just email you. You could even put email address and put email only or no telephone. The danger is that everything you put has a risk of sort of exposing something different about you. And that's not necessarily, it's actually not necessarily a bad thing. It is something that you could embrace. But I do know that that is a difficult decision to make, and not all employers are open to you talking about disabilities in that way. Rosa, what's your opinion on this one?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, isn't it? I get a lot of HR asking for my telephone, and I personally don't want to give the number. I would prefer email. If that's your preference, then drop them an email and say that you prefer email. I mean, in the end anyway, if you're going to be moving through to the next stage, don't forget to understand that there are things called accommodations and reasonable adjustments that you can ask for right throughout your job search journey. So it's really important to understand, well, what are my needs? How can I be supported? How can I be at my best? If you want to have a conversation or a discussion with us on this, please reach out. We're more than happy, to provide you with some support and guidance on this. Because these sorts of things come up a lot about when should I discuss, how should I discuss, you know, my disability. It's very, very common. So we're more than happy to have that conversation with you if you're finding this very frustrating at the moment. I hope that helps.
But we know it's not easy. It's not easy. Another question. During the pandemic year, I've seen quite a lot of Gen Z people posting themselves on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., and they get themselves hired. Do you think written CVs are now becoming old-fashioned?
Sorry, what was that? Sorry again, Tammy, sorry.
That's all right. It was during the pandemic year. I've seen quite a lot of Gen Z people, Gen Z, posting themselves on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., and they get themselves hired. Do you think written CVs are now becoming old-fashioned? Eventually, they will go the way of the arc because everything does. So by that, I mean they will eventually become outdated and there will be new ways to recruit people. Increasingly, LinkedIn is a very active place for recruitment to take place. Facebook has a lot of local area jobs. So it does happen a lot. However, for the sheer quantity of people who still apply by CV and for the ease of recruiters everywhere, I don't think CVs are going anywhere. I do think that there are sectors where you are more likely to be expected to do something via Instagram or LinkedIn or Facebook. For instance, if you want to work in social media and marketing, the chances are that, you know, you might be in a situation where submitting an application through Instagram or LinkedIn and having it done that way will become the norm. But I think probably what will happen is everything will be slightly more splintered. There will still be a core of jobs that's recruited to via CVs, and then there will be more specific roles and perhaps those aimed at younger people, digital natives, who will then be able to apply using things like Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. Rosa, have you got anything to add?
No, nothing to add to that. That's perfect, Tammy.
So then we also have, how come you didn't mention applicant tracking systems? We did. That was on slide 12. I know for a fact that HR rely on this software application to do the legwork, i.e. algorithms screen people's applications to select the right keyword to reduce time. So why is it important for the statement if the CV didn't present the right keyword? That's where the tailoring comes in. So remember we talked about tailoring. That's the bit that you tailor. So you've got that beautiful, you know, personal statement, and then you find that you have to keep twinkling with it to get it so that an ATS system will pick it out. And that's the bit that you need to refer back to the job advert, to the person specification, to the job description, and use the language that's in it and the language that's used throughout the websites of employers, and reflect that in the personal statement. So we did talk about that, but do have a look at the article that's on the Hive that specifically relates to applicant tracking systems. But the tailoring becomes so much more important because a human doesn't look at it straight away. The trick with ATS systems is getting it into the hands of a human. And that's what the tailoring does. Rosa, anything to add to that?
You know, there's lots of ways in which you can incorporate the keywords into your CV. Obviously, you've mentioned the personal statement, job titles, work sections. So those are the kind of the three key sections across your CV where you can be incorporating those keywords. But as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to make sure that it's authentic and that you have those skills and that you can back it up with achievements.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't claim anything. Don't say anything on your CV you don't want to talk about at interview, because the risk is that you'll be asked about something. And make sure everything that is on there is honest, because as I said before, if you're caught out lying, then the risks are quite high that you could lose the job that you got. So next question is, hello, what type of CV would you recommend for an employer requesting a CV without an advertised role? An example is NHS Digital, which has recently advertised with Evenbreak.
All right, Tammy, what was that question?
The question is, what type of CV would you recommend for an employer who's requesting a CV without having advertised a role? That's what I'm reading this as. It's phrased slightly differently. An example is NHS Digital, which has recently advertised with Evenbreak. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is a question about speculative applications. So this is about where there isn't a vacancy yet, but you would like to submit an application in the hope that a vacancy will come up. If that person can confirm whether that is correct or not, we can come back to that question shortly. But yes, speculative applications can work. So that's about knowing the sort of work that the organisation does, finding a contact at the organisation, and applying as you would if you knew that job existed. But certainly finding out what sort of gaps they have, what sort of jobs they might be starting to look at advertising, so you can get in there ahead of the crowd. So next question is it worth a disabled candidate looking for disability confidence scheme logos, where the employers recognise disabled people as equals, but I want to apply for a job that doesn't have the awareness? Does that mean I'm wasting my time? Okay, so there's two parts to that question. Firstly, disability confidence scheme is there to help you see who is most open to making adjustments and to making life easier as a disabled person. So it replaces the old 2-tick scheme, which was often referred to as the guaranteed interview scheme as well. In fact, guaranteed interviews have gone away. They are in fact not actually a thing now. And the reason being is that if you have 200 applicants, 50 of those declare that they have a disability, and 20 of those disabled people all meet the minimum criteria, in theory, you have to interview them all, even if you would only interview 6 people. So that scheme, that part of the scheme doesn't happen anymore. However, if you meet the minimum requirements, it is highly recommended that employers interview you anyway. There are 3 levels to the scheme. There's the disability confident leader, which is the top level. Those are the people who are really moving and shaking. They actually have to reaccredit to get that badge every 3 years. They have to prove that they're making adjustments in the recruitment process, that they are making adjustments for you in work, that they are supporting development of disabled people. So that's the top level. Middle level is employer. So those people have dedicated to recruiting and retaining disabled candidates. They maybe aren't as experienced in doing that. Please excuse me, that's my dog on the postman. And then at the bottom, it's, and forgive me because I've forgotten what the level at the bottom is, but there is a level where they're sort of committed. That's right. It's disability confident committed. So they're organisations that are considering everything and learning about employing disabled people and trying to do more. So if you do want to look out for disability confident labelling, I would recommend that you look at leadership level. Those are the organisations who are, say, for instance, recreating the recruitment process and getting people to recruit via their preferred method rather than saying, okay, send us a CV. There are lots of changes happening in that sort of leadership area. And there is a spreadsheet on the .gov.uk website that you can download that has all of the disability confident employers registered on it. And you can sort that by area.
You mentioned about the scheme, how it goes at the bottom with people learning how to accommodate, was it?
Yes.
Can you just clarify that, please?
Yeah, so disability confident committed is organisations who are starting to learn. So they've signed up to learn more about how to accommodate disabled people, because one of the things that we find as an organisation is we get a lot of concern from employers saying, well, we haven't got any disabled staff, so we don't know how to support them, when actually that's the wrong way round. What they should be doing is saying, we haven't got any, so we'll recruit some and then we'll know how to help them. And so these organisations are showing intent. They intend to help. How much they intend to help is very much down to the organisation, which is why leadership level does tend to be the best. And it'll be on the badge itself, which level they're at. But yeah, do have a look at the .gov website, because that spreadsheet is there and there's something like 10,000 employers on it. So all is not lost. People are trying, even if they need us to tell them where they're going wrong. In terms of whether you're applying for a job that doesn't have awareness and you're wasting your time, not necessarily. Sometimes it's about being explicit about what you need at all the stages of the recruitment process. So sometimes it's about saying, okay, so for instance, I'm deaf. I need you to communicate with me by email. If recruiters are unsure, if they're left wondering, then they tend to assume bad things. Don't let them assume anything. Be confident about it, but you know, you have to have these adjustments made. You're not asking because you're being dramatic. You're asking actually to be able to have the same opportunity as someone who isn't facing the barriers that you're facing. So it doesn't mean that you're wasting your time, but you do have to be explicit about what you want. Rosa, have you got anything to add to that?
Nothing to add to that, Tammy.
Brilliant. Okay, and with that, I think we're done. So if I could ask everyone who's still with us, thank you very much for your time and for staying with us. If when you end the webinar, you could complete the survey that will be on your screens, that would be great. We really need to know how we're doing. We're still in the early stages of developing all these webinars, and we're doing it so that we give you the best possible advice that we can that's tailored to the things that you need. But from me, thank you very much. Rosa?
Thanks, Tammy. Thanks, Toby.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.